Thank you, Leanne.
This is Alan Lovell, and I just quickly want to say thank you to everyone for joining us on behalf of the APH ConnectCenter and Family Connect. The Family Connect page, familyconnect.org, is resources for families of a visually impaired person. And part of the reason for this is so that we can help you help us. And vice versa, with sharing of resources, how families are making it work during COVID-19 and how we're all working from home. And so with that, I want to introduce Robin Lowell, who is going to be our moderator, and she's going to ask the questions of our three panelists, who are parents of visually impaired kids. And at the end, I'll come back with a little bit of a wrap-up question for you. Robin?
Great. Thank you, Alan. So yes, my name is Robin Lowell, and I'm a teacher of visually impaired and a content writer. So I actually have lived in this world. I was the distance learning high school math teacher at the Washington State School for the Blind for 5 years. So this is right in my wheelhouse, this distance learning and with our students with visual impairments. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to introduce to you all of our panelists. We have Kelly and Brittany and Darren. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's start off with having our parents tell us a little bit about themselves. So how about Brittany, when you start out telling us about your experience?
Hi, my name is Brittany Clarkson. So I'm from Shepherdsville, Kentucky, a little town just south of Louisville. I have two children. I have Addie, who is 9, and she is completely blind. Her diagnosis is ONH. And then I also have a 4-year-old daughter whose name is Kennedy. I am currently working as a TVI in my local school district. I'm in my 2nd year completing the TVI program with UAK, and so I'm kind of getting a double dose of things on the parent side and the teacher side of things as well. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. All right, so Kelly, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. My name is Kelly Schubert, and I am a mother to a daughter that is currently 9, that received her diagnosis when she was 8. She has a condition called neurofibromatosis that had some side effects to it that caused her to lose her, not full sight. She's considered low vision. And I also have an older daughter that is a freshman in high school as well. So
great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Glad you're here. And Darren, let's hear from you about your experience.
Yeah, hey, how's everybody? I'm Darren Lewis. My wife and I have 4 children. The youngest 2 were adopted. And the youngest one is Joshua. Joshua is from China. He's been with us for 3.5 years, and Joshua has congenital glaucoma. He does have a little bit of light vision and color, but other than that, for all intents and purposes, he cannot see to do a whole lot, although he does like to ride his bike with a little assistance from mom and dad. So he's my go-getter. And so we're happy to be with you guys today.
Thank you so much. And I so appreciate the time, giving us this time to really talk about this experience of learning from home and remote learning. So what we'd like to talk to you about today is really this world of non-traditional learning. And so, every student is doing this right now, this non-traditional. So I think it's a great experience for all families to understand what non-traditional learning is like. And but let's really dive into what this world is like for our students with visual impairment. So I have a series of questions that I'd like to ask, and then you can just feel free to jump in, not really any order of who goes first, but if you have ideas, please just let us know what you think, all sorts of different topics. But before we start talking about the school setting, so in the beginning, a lot of our experience was really, okay, parents, go, with not much to work on, not much to work with, while our teachers were scrambling to really figure out how this is all going to work. So what are resources that you have found in the beginning and even now that you're working on with your student, with your child? And were these things accessible? And what's your experience with that?
Well, I can say that Claire had, which I'd mentioned, low vision. So she does have some vision, and she has several magnifiers that she uses. One is the Jupiter. She does use her iPad. She has several programs on the iPad that she uses, a reading program. She also uses another program that she can open up documents in and kind of blow them up, you know, to the size that she needs. So during this, we were blessed to already have some of the resources that we needed, because we had those before the coronavirus pandemic started. So as far as how they presented the schoolwork to Claire, we kind of had to navigate through that a little bit because it wasn't in her normal school setting, or she's either got a piece of paper where she's putting that under the Jupyter to read, or a book. So a lot of the things were in a PowerPoint type spreadsheet or PowerPoint program that she had to go through each of the PowerPoints. So, you know, the only thing is some of it I had to transpose to paper, you know, and allow her to be able to see, because a lot of things, if I blow it up, you know, on the screen, it got blurrier. It didn't stay crisp where she needs it really bright and crisp. So it was just navigating through some of that, but she was able to use some of the resources that she had already to get her schoolwork done.
Great, thank you. Brittany or Darren, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say we had a lot of technology in our house when this all started. Joshua loves the Brailliant. He uses the Braille Note. He uses his iPad. He has a traditional Perkins Brailler, and he uses all of the things and does so very well. So it was very helpful for my wife and I because so much of that technology he had already learned at school. So when we had to bring all that home, for instance, the first day my wife had to check him into his classroom, and she couldn't figure out how to do that. And he said, well, I can do that, Mom. And he took him 30 seconds, and he was in, checked himself back out at the end of the day, and was able to really handle that for us because he already knew how to use it. So kudos to our vision room team here in Louisville. That's such an outstanding job of teaching technology to our son.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we had a really good experience as well. My daughter attends a school for the blind here in Kentucky, and so everything sent home was already accessible and adaptable, including outside resources that they had sent to us. She was ready and using the technology that she used in the school. They had sent all that home with her. So her Braille writer, they sent an iPad home. We have like a Bluetooth keyboard we use here, so we were using that. So yeah, I mean, same kind of great experience. The team at the School for the Blind did a great job in getting everything to us and making sure it's accessible for her.
Great, fantastic. So the next question I'd like to talk about is, and you've touched on it on quite a bit, is do you feel your child has all the necessary technology they need to be successful during this time? And so I'm hearing that you're able to take all the technology home, or were there pieces of technology that you weren't allowed to take home? And do you feel that that all of these things are in place for now that we are in a more non-traditional remote learning setting?
No, I really think that the school, and especially Claire's vision teacher, that is the most amazing vision teacher, made sure that Claire had everything that she needed. And she constantly touched base with us throughout the week to make sure that there wasn't anything that Claire needed, or was she struggling with something or completing something. So I feel like we were pretty prepared and ready for it.
It's great to hear.
Yeah, Joshua attends a Jefferson County public school, so he is not at the School for the Blind. And so we've had a few issues with technology conflicting, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, with assignments that were given to him, for instance, maybe by a history teacher or a math teacher in his regular classroom setting. But the vision room teachers have been absolutely wonderful to work with Joshua to make those things accessible. And so he did a Zoom call or a Google Meet call every morning with his vision room teachers to kind of walk through his assignments and say, okay, that one's not accessible, so let's change that and let's do this instead. And so that's been really helpful for us. It's just the proactivity of our teaching staff at the school has been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know we had talked about the technology coming home, and so we had already had a lot of that in place, and then what we didn't have, they sent home. And we even had we had a problem with our brailler, and our teacher dropped off a new one for us. Addison's braille note didn't get to come home with her because it was being worked on, so that was something I would have liked for her to have more at home, where we could have worked more on that. But otherwise, we had everything we needed.
Great. So this leads me into the next question that we've really been talking about is, in this remote learning, all students are trying to wrap their head around how they get their materials and resources. So things are all obviously coming through technology, and I've heard a lot of stories of teachers dropping off packets on front porches, and all these different ways teachers are getting materials to students. So thinking about not only our teachers of visually impaired, but thinking about our students in the gen ed setting, with all the other teachers who are creating materials, are you really finding that the materials across the board, and not just from your TVIs, are accessible for your students? This is a three-parter, so lots to think about. Are your materials really accessible? And what steps are being taken both in gen ed and from your specialists that these materials are being modified and adapted to meet your students' needs? And what are you doing as a parent to ensure that these accommodations are being met? So again, it's like, are you finding these materials are accessible in both gen ed settings and as well as students from your specialists? What steps are being taken, and what are you doing proactively to make sure that all these accommodations are happening?
So I guess the first part of your question, you had mentioned pockets and things like that. We did not get pockets. Everything was sent to us digitally. But in a situation, I guess, for the parents that have a child with visual impairment and was receiving packets, I guess if Claire was in that situation, we would probably use a program called Notability that she has on our iPad, which allows us to scan those documents into that program, and Claire to be able to make those larger to the size that she needs them. In my situation, I have a child that's more low vision. And as far as getting anything that I needed, I guess we're just in a situation where we're so blessed with our visually impaired teacher and the relationship we have with her, that it would be a phone call or a text immediately, and she would supply us with whatever we needed at a drop of a second. And Darren had mentioned Zoom calls and things like that the teachers were doing with Claire, and her vision teacher was doing the same thing. They were kind of getting really creative with some of the reading assignments that Claire had. She also has a special education teacher that works with her on math, and so she would call her and they would do the math. A lot of it was read to Claire, where she wasn't really seeing it. So it was more, I was sitting down with her one-on-one a lot of the time and reading a lot of it to her. And then I would put in the answer for her as she was answering things. So it was a lot of one-on-one as a parent with my child, doing a lot of the schoolwork with her, and not as much independent working.
If I can remember all the parts to that question.
I know, it was a big one. I can review. Are the materials accessible from gen ed and specialists, and steps to be taken to make sure they're accessible, and what are you doing?
Yeah, so I think we ran a few issues. So Joshua's in the process he's in fourth grade of starting to learn Nmth math. And Nmth is very difficult if it's not hands-on and the teacher's not there to actually show him. And of course, my wife and I have no clue how to do this. And so the math assignments were frequent things that we would have to go back to the vision room teachers and say, hey, how can we adjust this for him? For instance, things like making an array or doing other things, or perhaps putting together a presentation that was not accessible for him. We just adapted that. They said, okay, well, we know we can make a presentation with this program as opposed to what the teacher asked for. So we were able to get around most of that. But I think probably above everything else, he struggled a little bit with the math aspect because it was just so hard to do without having that hands-on. And so, you know, it was just a lot of communication between my wife and I and the teachers there at the school. We have the blessing of just really having to reach out to the vision room staff, and then they will reach out in turn to the general education teachers. Most of the time what they did was they required Joshua to use his Braille note to email his general education teachers and say, hey, this isn't accessible for me, so this is what my teacher and I have decided we're going to do. Is this okay? And so they required him to do that, which was great on, you know, teaching him that skill as well. So.
Great, thank you.
As far as like what came home, materials coming home for my daughter, so we were sent both Braille materials, manipulatives. She had a couple of Zoom classes every day, and I worked really hard with my daughter she was getting into new programs on her iPad that she hadn't been into before since we were learning from home. And so just making her independent and walking her through those, getting onto those programs and logging in the first few times, and then letting her do that for herself. You know, I was like, look, if we're going to be doing this for 2 months, like we're going to learn how to do it on your own and build those skills too. But everything for the most part was accessible, and her teachers were great and sent home like instructions in Braille so that I wasn't just reading everything to her. So we were very fortunate.
It's wonderful. Thank you. So we're talking about all these ways, you know, as a teacher and, you know, as a parent, we all know that creativity is a big part of parenting and teaching and learning. And there's a lot of ways to be creative. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. You know, our teachers are very creative in how they work with our students with visual impairments and getting all this content across. Now, having your child at home, it has probably given you a lot of opportunities to really be creative when teaching and working with your students on topics. You know, and I do it too as a parent. I'm trying to think of all these different ways to help my kids, which I have a very wide range, high school down to second grade, of helping these kids stay engaged in their learning and stay engaged with their content. So maybe you could tell us some of the hacks, because, you know, in the technology world, we talk about all these workarounds and new ways of doing things as a hack. So some hacks that you've been using while working with your kids at home, whether it's like content and materials that have come home and that are a tricky subject. What are you doing as a parent to help like encourage the learning and keep the learning going and make it adaptable and usable for your own kid? So if you guys want to talk about some of the hacks that you've done over the last, I don't know, however long it's been, I've lost track of time, since we've been home.
So something that works really well for our family is Addison really likes to know like what is expected of her, what her day is going to look like. So just kind of creating this own routine at our home, so that she knows like, hey, this is when I'm going to be done with schoolwork. This is when I'm going to have free time. This is, you know, when I'm going to have lunch. That really works well for her. And so I think it's just finding what works well for your child and using that, but also being flexible, because, you know, there were times where it was just, you know, she was overwhelmed or she was having a bad day and it was obvious, and just reading those cues and being like, okay, she needs, we would do movement breaks or just like starting the day out with a fun song, and just finding those things that motivates your child, and then using that to you know, help them in their schoolwork. But several times I was like, she was very bored at doing like science at home and just like, you know, watching a video or reading text, and so, you know, looking up on Pinterest, like, what experiment can I do that would work with this? You know, that was very hands-on, and just being able to relate that back to what she's doing in school and still keep her fun and engaged.
Brittany, you might find turning your video off will make your sound clearer because you're cutting in and out quite a bit.
So with Claire, we were learning fractions, and fractions is really fun with a fourth grader. And there were times where I would even pull out the measuring cups to show her what a whole looks like is 1 cup, you know, and things like that. Claire is a person that has to know exactly what she has to complete, when she's going to get her break, how long it's going to take her to do everything. Are we going to work for an hour? Are we going to work for, you know, how long are we going to work? And so I had to make sure that I told Claire, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and then you can have your break. And then when you get back from your break, then we'll work on this and this. But I tried to make sure, even though some of the stuff doesn't keep her attention, some of the schoolwork doesn't keep her attention real well, I did make sure that we did do some of her extracurricular classes, just to break up the stuff that she had to do, and tied in art in there, and PE and things like that, just so she had the fun parts of the schoolwork to do, and in addition to the stuff that she didn't enjoy as much to do. So we tried to get as creative as we could with what we had at home, and really just to keep her attention.
With Joshua, I think our most creative aspects were with O&M. That's was something Joshua's he's a tech kid. He wants to sit on his iPad all day. He has to read fully by Braille, but he does have enough eyesight to see movement of light. So he loves to be on his iPad. So just getting him up and doing something, it was a little bit of the challenge. We had to be creative. Fortunately, in our area, the park system didn't close during this COVID shutdown. And so we tried to take them out every single day that it was warm. And one day we would take him on a trail through the woods. The next day it would be a trail that was gravel. The next day it would be a trail that was paved. And then he actually worked with his O&M teacher. We would record him, just like 30-second recordings, and that would be part of his grade, that he would be teaching us how to do things. And so we would send those videos to his O&M teacher, you know, and again, things like helping mom in the kitchen, you know, with the measurements, as Kelly said, and helping with those kinds of things. Just we tried to integrate that pretty much daily.
Great, thank you. And so, since that's a nice segue into one of the questions that we have about O&M. O&M has been handled many different ways, and the O&M instructors that I've talked to during this time have been doing a lot of different things, from zooming into the home to all these different things. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with O&M? How has it been happening, and what are you seeing that is working, and what is not working so well for your families during this time when we're talking about orientation and mobility?
Yeah, so I think overall we've been very pleased with the nature of the study for O&M during this time. It was pretty accessible for him. The O&M teacher did a Google Meet call with him 3 times a week. She would have him show her things on that call. The struggle has been really for my wife and I in this area is that we don't really know all of the cane skills that we need to know to be able to help him. And so we really have to rely on him to tell us when he's doing something wrong or right. And so we're consistently saying, are you doing this correctly for this surface or this, you know, wherever we happen to be. So that was a little bit of a struggle, just because my wife and I don't specifically know how to use the cane. And to be able to reinforce that at home. But all in all, I think he did really well with working with his O&M teacher. I was very pleased with her proactivity.
Kelly or Brittany, do you have any thoughts on this area? If you are,
Claire didn't qualify. She has enough vision that she doesn't use a mobility specialist. So we didn't run into that issue over this period of time.
Her O&M teacher sent home a packet of different activities for us to do while we were away. So we really took kind of a different focus of what she would typically work on during her school day and made it more home friendly. So we worked on things like creating a fire escape plan for her to get out of the house independently, you know, should there be an emergency like that. We worked on independent routes to the mailbox and getting the mail on your own, and just safe travel within our neighborhood, and listening for cars when we're crossing streets and things like that. And she also got a new cane, so we were working on like folding her cane and all those different skills. But yeah, it was really nice to kind of focus on those things that we normally don't even think about or have time to focus on at home during this time. So yeah.
Great.
It definitely helps to have good active
Hopefully
parents
hear me a
involved.
little bit.
Yeah, this is Alan popping in. I thought about since we're about halfway through time-wise, might check in with Leanne to see if there are any questions so far coming from the participants or
You do. So think about when the questions were asked fairly early on. I think, Darren, you were the one that was indicating you were using an iPad, but if I'm wrong, you guys catch me. What apps did you find useful on the iPad?
Oh, wow. We use a ton of apps on our iPad. One of the great things that we were able to use at this point was the Scholastic website. I know that's not really necessarily a program that is specifically designed just for children that are blind, but they have the accessibility of going in there and like having the videos for their history lesson read to them through the videos. And so that was something that we used twice a week at least, was going into those accessible apps where he could listen to his assignment and be able to then respond on his Braille note to the questions that were supposed to be answered. And the teachers were very proactive in allowing us to have that access to select, hey, this topic is what we're going to cover this week, because we know there's a video connected in Scholastic's website that it covers that time period. For instance, we did the French and Indian War was 1 week, and they knew that there was a video there, and so they specifically chose that because of that, which really, really helped us.
How were you using the Brilliant? Right?
Well, he uses a mixture of all of these things, and it's really become for him what he prefers to use for which task. He uses the Braille note probably more than anything for email, for doing some of his basic assignments like answering questions. The questions on his history exams or his homework were multiple choice, so that makes it very easy. He uses his Brilliant a lot if he's just doing email without an assignment attached. If he's reading something on the screen without an assignment attached, then he'll connect his Brilliant into that and just use that for reading purposes. He probably gravitates to the Braille note as much as anything, but the Brilliant is one of his favorites for email.
Okay. What screen reader program is he using? Possibly more than one?
I do not know. Yes, I believe he uses more than one. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
And I'm going to add real quick on the
Sure,
iPad.
go for
I know
it.
I mentioned this, but I just wanted to re-mention it. Claire uses a program called Notability for those kids that can use that program, that have enough vision to be able to see what they scan into that. And plus you can do voice text on that too. So if it's a paper she's typing or something like that, then she can voice text those assignments. She also uses Bookshare, which is a program that allows books to be read to her.
Okay. As parents, how are you working around the problem that some Braille notes couldn't open files if they contained pictures, problems that often are coming from a mainstream classroom?
As a TVI, I mean, my daughter didn't bring her Braille note home, and so obviously we didn't encounter that, but just being on the TVI side of things, I just like work closely with your vision teacher, because if they don't know, they can't fix it. So I would just work really closely with them. Some of the gen ed teachers may not realize that that's happening, so I just think making people aware and working closely with your teachers, they're happy to try to problem solve that with you.
Out of the three of you, how many of you were working full-time at home or trying to work full-time at home? You'll have to talk for those people on our audience who can't see you.
I was working full-time at home.
I was as well.
Yeah, in my case, I was still working full-time outside the home during this crisis, but my wife was able to do part-time hours during this and work from home.
Okay. Did any of you have your students using a Chromebook?
No, we did not use a Chromebook. We had a desktop computer at home that we used along with her iPad.
Okay, Darren or?
Yeah, we do not use a Chromebook.
Okay.
He does have a few things that he uses a Surface for that are specifically Microsoft based, but we don't use a Chromebook. So.
Okay, and one more Chromebook?
We typically use an iPad.
Okay, okay. How much input, Darren, did you have from those O&M assignments that you said you were being given?
How much input do we have? I think we had a lot, I would say. You know, we had a phenomenal teacher. Unfortunately, she's retiring this year. But she did just a phenomenal job of getting with us and saying, okay, this is what I want him to do. I want him to be out. If you're out in the woods, do this. We would ask for clarification if there was something we didn't understand. And then she would say, just take a video for him, send it to me. I will review it and then get back with you on what he needs to change. If he was doing something that was incorrect or, you know, those kinds of things. So it was pretty easy actually for our part, the way that she set that up. You know, she would do things like I wanted to do certain patterns, certain techniques. One day, you know, walk in a certain pattern to find a location, or next day maybe work on a technique. And she always told us those things in advance and kind of did help explain what that looked like for us so that we could do that. But then subsequently had the videos to
Okay, nice. Did any of the three of you have your students using Google Classroom?
Yes.
Yes, that's what all of Claire's assignments were on.
Yeah, all of ours as well.
Okay.
We did not use Google Classroom. We were strictly, if we had online learning, it was all through Zoom.
Zoom, okay. Were any of you encouraged or using Objective Ed software or lessons? If it doesn't sound familiar, you probably weren't. So,
No.
okay, okay. And then are teachers accommodating? Were you finding your teachers accommodating to your children? And how do you feel the classroom teachers were handling making those things accessible?
Claire's fourth grade teacher was very accommodating through the whole process. If there was anything I had a question on or anything I needed, it was just messaging her and she got back with me immediately. Claire's visually impaired teacher was excellent on, she even called me and said, hey, let me just take over this assignment with you today with Claire. We'll just do this one together. And so you don't have to worry about this one this week. And so she would make a call every single day and they would work on that assignment together. So we were kind of very, very, very blessed with just who is our army standing behind us through the whole process.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, in Joshua's school, in fourth grade, you have a different teacher for every subject. So we had multiple teachers that we have to work with on a daily basis, but all of them worked really well with the vision team. We did have one glitch. For instance, his reading teacher assigned a specific book, and that book would not work on the Braille note. For whatever reason, it just would not download. And so we just simply went back to the vision room teacher, went back and said, hey, is it okay if he reads The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe instead? They, of course, approved that because The Witch and the Wardrobe was working. And so we downloaded that one, and that got him hooked on the whole series. Now he's reading those over the summer, so that's great.
Okay, Robin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Those were great questions. Those are really great questions, and it actually makes me think of a lot more that I want to ask you all. But let's kind of think about, so we've talked a lot about these, the core classes, and some of the, you know, O&M, those important things. But let's talk about your experiences in the expanded course, such as PE or other areas. What have you done? And I know, Darren, I heard you talk about, you know, O&M, going out into the woods and hiking, and that's fantastic. So what are all of you guys doing for those other areas outside of the reading, the writing, the math?
So Claire was given an assignment that we kind of had fun with because we were in Florida, and she had to do an art assignment where she had to build a sculpture, and she could do that with Play-Doh or clay or anything that we had at home, but why not do it with sand since we were in Florida? So Claire had really a lot of fun with that project. She built a mermaid out of sand, and that was part of her sculpture that she sent in. So even though we were at the beach and we were doing schoolwork all week while we were there, we still tried to have fun with some of the assignments. But Claire loves art, and that's probably her favorite subject. So she has fun with anything that they give her with art assignments.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So Addison's teachers, like, they would make fun games out of it. They would say, you know, they would do certain challenges, you know, send us videos of you playing your favorite games at home or your favorite PE activity, and then they would post them to Facebook from their school's page. She also had, like, they did Zoom yoga classes through their school. She did PT Zooms with other of her friends that were in school with her. Her OT sent us activities, and we were in constant contact with them. So I feel like we kept everything going even during the NTI.
Great.
Yeah, Joshua's teachers did a really creative thing where they did a group class where everybody was on the call at one time, and they did like an Aladdin theme, and every kid had to have a magic carpet. And so they sat on a towel on the floor, and they had to scoot back and forth several times to kind of be that was their PE class for the day, but they all did it together. And so they could all hear the other kids laughing, and, you know, and so it was really good for the social aspect as well as the exercise aspect. But that one has been, again, our challenge, because he's my robot kid. He wants to be taking robots apart and stuff. He doesn't. So that one has been a little bit of a challenge, PE. So we just, again, kind of made him go outside as much as possible. And like I said before, he is almost fully blind, does see some color and light, but he does ride his bike. And so when we're outside with him, you know, we just get him to be on his bicycle, and we have to be there to watch. Fortunately, we live on a dead-end street with very few houses, so there's not a lot of traffic. And so he did really well overall, I think. And so we were very pleased.
Great. So, I'm hearing a lot of, there's a lot of parent interacting and helping out and all of these kind of things. And really, a lot of the teachers kind of that consult model where they're helping you guys be the teacher, like the O&M. You're learning what you need to do, and then you need to go out and do it. So my question is Darren, I heard you say that, you know, like with cane skills, you weren't exactly sure, and you're learning from Joshua what exactly he wanted, what he needed to be doing. So as parents and in this setting, what more resources would you like to have? Because it's really a unique, amazing opportunity to take all these skills kids are learning in the classroom and take them out and apply them in the greater community, your home, the parks, all these kind of things. So what more resources would you all like to see in order to be able to be, well, one, understanding what your kids are learning and doing, as well as being able to assist them more in that learning?
I think overall we've been really pleased. There's not a lot of gap that we see that we need. I think and some of that may just be myself needing to be a little bit more proactive on learning some of the cane skills that we need to have. But that's really the biggest struggle for us is we push him a lot. We want him to be independent. And he's doing well in a lot of ways, but you know, he's 10 years old. He reverts back to wanting to hug mom as we walk through a store rather than walking on his own. And so we just try to make sure that we're enforcing those things. And the OM teacher does help with, you know, instructing us on, well, you know, make sure that he's showing you what you need to be doing. And so one of the videos that he had to take was we had to videotape a guide for the blind that did it properly and a guide for the blind that did it improperly and submit that to the O&M. And Joshua instructed me as the guide what to do in both situations. And that was just kind of a fun way for him to teach his mom and I on what to do.
Great.
And kind of where I am as a parent with Claire is Claire's diagnosis is fairly new for us. We're going on maybe about not even 2 years of her diagnosis, and she's got a lot of other learning issues on top of just visual impairment, just given the fact that she had some other things going on that really caused the visual impairment. So we're still trying to navigate and find really what works for Claire. And that's almost a daily thing. You know, one day she might not be able to learn it that way. And then another day, oh yeah, I can do it that way. Well, yesterday you couldn't do it that way. Well, today you can't do it that way. So it's just, Claire's a challenge in herself, not only with her vision, but also with other things. So we're still trying to navigate and figure out what works for her in learning, and trying to get her to be more independent. And that's been our biggest struggle with her. And she's not real good with wanting to do it on her own.
I think for us, it was just a lot of trial and error. As I don't necessarily feel like I had like a lack of resources, or there's things that I'm missing. It's sometimes just a lack of time. You know, like trying to fit everything into one day, or but overall, I had a lot of resources as a TBI, just being in other parent groups on Facebook, and sometimes seeing like what they've been doing or what isn't working for them, or something that did work for them. I attended like different TBI trainings and with my cadre and in groups like that, and all of that stuff is really helpful for my students, and then weeding out what would be, you know, applicable to my daughter at home. So
great. Thank you. So actually, Brittany, that was a brilliant segue into my next question. Is, as parents, our plates fill up so quickly during the day, and you know, from all of our panelists saying that they're all working, if not part but full time. So really thinking about, and maybe talking about your experience and ideas that you have of, we have a lot on our plates right now. We are teachers and, you know, spouses and, you know, cleaning our houses. I mean, all these pieces where we're all home all the time. There's so many hats that we're wearing right now. So maybe talk about tools and strategies that you are using to really help yourself get through each and every day and be successful, whatever that looks like in that day, because it's different every day.
So one of my things is I didn't have a schedule, because I knew that if I had a schedule, that wasn't necessarily going to work out, because the demands of my work could happen at any moment. And so I could get a phone call, I could get an email, I could have a conference call I've got to get on. So if I had a schedule for Claire, if I said, okay, we're going to start at 9 o'clock and we're going to do this and this till such and such time, that schedule was going to fail. You know, so my thing is we got up every day, and every day looked different, and it didn't matter what we did that day, as long as we got to something and she got something completed. And so I, as a parent, didn't stress myself out over, okay, am I getting this done and this done by this certain time? No, we could have been doing homework after dinner. You know, if that was the time we could get to something, then that was the time that we could get to something. So I tried not to really put a full-blown schedule on Claire, just because it wasn't going to work out regardless if I did or not.
Yeah, in our home, it's the opposite. We had to have a schedule. So we have a senior that just graduated from high school last week, down to Joshua, who's 10. But both of our adopted kids are special needs. And so our 8th grader is in some ways much harder special needs than Joy. Hers is more intellectual. Whereas Joshua, we just joke that, you know, Joshua is blind, but he can do anything he wants to do. The kid is, you know, he has no other disabilities whatsoever. He is brilliant. He can figure things out on his own. And so what we found was with Joshua, because my wife was carrying the brunt of that, the weight of that, she had to put so much time and effort in with our daughter, who is in 8th grade, that sometimes we didn't feel like we had quite as much time that we maybe needed to give to Joshua, because Joshua could figure it out. And our 2 biological biological kids being a senior and a freshman in high school, both of them also, we didn't really have to help them at all. But a schedule was an absolute necessity because of our daughter has to have a schedule. She has to know what's coming. She has to know how long it's going to take, those kinds of things. We had a schedule of, how many Zoom calls do we have in a day with 4 kids? And it showed who needed to be on what call at what time. I had to upgrade my internet at the house because we just couldn't handle the amount of people on the internet at one time. And so for us, it had to be very scheduled. But in Joshua's case, Joshua wanted to get in. He wanted to get it done first thing in the morning so that he had the rest of his day to play with robots in his iPad. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like to say that we had like a flexible schedule. So generally, like my schedule was changing between when I was able to meet with my students or when I had trainings or meetings at work. But as long as Madison knew like kind of generally like how the day was going to go, what time she had what Zoom classes, fitting in my other daughters, like she's just in preschool, but she was still having Zoom classes. So just putting all of that in together and then making like a little daily schedule, like this is what's going to happen first, this is what's going to happen next, then we're going to this, then we're going to take a break. That was helpful, but also I had to learn to tell people no, because Addison, we would be getting calls from like 3 or 4 different elementary teachers every day, and then an OT and a PT and an O&M, and the PT would be like, hey, can we do PT tonight? And I'm like, no, tonight's not good. And then sometimes just letting Addison like do something that was fun so that we weren't like all miserable just doing schoolwork all day. And then I think, just giving yourself some grace and like realizing that, not every day is going to be super successful or super great, and, you'll try again tomorrow.
Oh, that's great. And I think it's really important to recognize and notice and give yourself the grace to understand every family is different and it's going to work different for every single family. And we've heard 3 completely different strategies and schedules overlapping, but at the end of the day, it's understanding what your family and your students need and being able to really recognize that and, again, give yourself grace to figure out what's working or not. So we have just a few more minutes. So Leanne, are there more questions that I think this would be a great segue into seeing what our...
And just know we scheduled this one for an hour and a half, so we do have time.
Okay. Oh,
so
great.
No panicking. No panicking. Okay. We do have more questions. And so we had an original question about Google Classroom, and some of you identified that you do have that, you've been using that. So there's 3 different questions about Google Classroom that came in. Did any of the children get assignments on Google Slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Since JAWS, the screen reader, doesn't read the Google Slides, what did you do? Or what did your TPI do?
I read everything to her.
Okay, that's real. That's real.
And I had to type all her answers. So there would be a slide that would maybe have a couple math problems. And so what I would do is I would take those math problems and I would write them down on a piece of paper. But Claire can't see, she can only see a certain pencil, a dark lead pencil or a marker. So I had to rewrite those problems for her bigger, and then she would solve those problems. And then once she had them solved, then I would type her answer into the Google slide.
Yeah, in our case, what we requested was the division room teachers went back to the general education teachers and asked for that to be adjusted to make it accessible, since we couldn't open those. And they were all very accommodating in that and figured out ways to make that creative for him.
Okay. Okay. How accessible as a whole was Google Classroom other than Google Slides?
We loved it. I think it was very easy for him. Again, using his Braille note as a whole to get into that. He was able to check in every day, read his assignments on his own, find his choice boards, figure out which choice board he wanted to do, open that up. All that was extremely accessible. It was only the slides and a couple of those books that were assigned for reading that we really had an issue with, and for whatever reason they just wouldn't work.
Okay. Okay. Did any of you work with and this is coming, remember, from possibly a different area than where you are. Have any of you worked with your state library for the blind or lending service to get Braille or audio materials, either through books, through the mail, or through a Bard mobile, which might be something that's particular to a certain region?
We don't use the library, but we use a program called Bookshare. And there were times when I would go on to Scholastic's website, which Darren had mentioned using Scholastic, and I would Google a book, you know, for her age, you know, reading level, and then it would come back, you know, which books, and then I would go on to Bookshare and I would just put in the title and it would load it. I had no problems, and I don't pay for that. It's a program that's set up through the school. The school actually has to set you up with the Bookshare account, and through Bookshare, those books are read to you. And Claire could enlarge. She can enlarge the font to what she wants to enlarge it to. She can adjust the speed of the speaking. All the words highlight as they're being read. So it's a pretty nice program that she uses for reading.
Okay.
Yeah, we use a mixture. So when Joshua came home, he was from China. He had never learned any English at all. He'd be functional in English in 3 weeks and fluent in 3 months. But one of the things that we did immediately was we signed up for audiobooks through the Kentucky State Library. Those are sent to him once a month, or whenever he gets finished with one, we send one back. It's sent back to us. They pull one for his age group, send it back to us. So those are all audio books. They're on like a cassette, and he has a specific player that is provided by the state library. And then we also use the same program that Kelly was just talking about for downloading books and so on for that. So.
Okay. You were recording videos and sending them to your orientation mobility instructor. Can you share, did you use a phone, an iPad, a digital camera, all three?
We used a phone and an iPad. When we were in the home, we would use the iPad just because it gives us a little bit of a broader ability to do things. But when we were out at the park, we just used one of our phones. And we would literally just text the video to her, email it to her.
Okay. None of you might have experienced it, or you might have. There is a app called Classroom Dojo, or Class Dojo, depending on how you abbreviate it. It's not the most accessible app. So if you did use it, do you have any advice about access if Class Dojo was used with your student?
We did use Class Dojo, but Claire never communicated through it. It was me communicating with the teacher. It was awesome, just because Claire's teacher, like I would have said, okay, I can't find this. It's telling me to do something, or it's telling her to do something. We can't find it. And I'd say, help, I can't find this. And she would respond to me immediately. So as far as that, it was excellent. But Claire herself never used that or communicated by herself with that program.
Either of the other two know or used Class Dojo?
We did. As far as I know, we did not have any major issues with it. We had a few glitches along the way with some things, but I think that was a little bit more on Mom and I's operator error on our part, not on Joshua's. But it was an excellent app. We used it the entire time. It was, as Kelly said again, it was very easy to get in contact with the teachers, and Joshua didn't seem to have too much trouble with it, even navigating that on his own.
Okay, opinion from all three of you. How much teaching from your orientation mobility instructor or TVI, some of you have one, some of you have both, about skills would you like and or have the time for? How much teaching would you like or have the time for? Darren, you want to start?
Sure. That's a tough question. I think we would like to learn everything that we possibly could. But the basics of how to help him manipulate crowds, you know, before this COVID crisis occurred and we were in a restaurant, the tables were very close together. It was absolutely packed. Those kind of situations is where we really need the most help telling him, okay, now if you're in this situation, this is how you handle this, because it was literally wall-to-wall people. And a lot of the people were tall enough that they didn't see that he was carrying a white cane as he was trying to navigate through this. So things like that in those situations where it might be a little bit more overwhelming for him as a 10-year-old boy in a crowd would be the most helpful for us.
Kelly?
I think our biggest struggle right now with Claire is independence. She can do a lot of stuff on her own because she's got a lot of vision. She's considered low vision, but her confidence in that she's going to be able to do her work on her own, or she can complete it on her own, and that's just something that is just going to have to be instilled in her over time, and that we're working on. But finding really all the different programs and things that, and that's just over time, it changes, like I said, with her daily on what she prefers. And it all depends on what we're doing at the time. But I think Claire's biggest issue is feeling confident in doing it on her own.
Okay, so how much time would you want for you to
How
learn?
much would I want for me to learn? Oh, gosh. I don't know. A lot.
A lot. Okay. Brittany, what about you? How much time and teaching would you like?
Well, fortunately, like going through the TVI program, I'm getting a lot of this training now, so it's really great because this is like pushing me to learn things that my daughter is learning or has already learned or is going to need to learn. But I will, like, just to echo off of what Darren said, I will say that I think there's such a huge deficit for especially like cane skills and like knowing what parents are, like how to instruct their child or knowing what's appropriate or if they're doing something right or not. We had attended a cane skills competition back in October, and a lot of it was the parent was acting as a human guide during the competition, and like I had no idea like all of the correct ways to be a human guide for all the different situations, like when you do stairs or when you're going through a doorway, when you're going through a crowd, when you need to switch sides, when you're entering an elevator. So I'm really surprised that there's not more out there, because I definitely think that parents want it. But having like the time is really, I think, the problem and the challenge for parents. Okay. I know it is for me.
No, that's okay.
I'm laughing. This is Alan. I'm laughing at that because as a blind person myself, the O&M skills were taught to me as a young person, but no one in my world outside of the instructional world knows sighted guide skills. That remains true today unless I happen to be traveling with a professional in the field. So it's always good to instill into the child how to guide, so I just thought that was funny.
That is good. How did you handle teaching the technology skills needed to access the instruction on top of the academics, especially if your student wasn't quite there yet? It's to you guys.
I had been introduced to most of this technology before it came home. I think the new part for us was maybe accessing some websites or apps that she typically didn't access at school. So just learning to get into those things on her own. And really it was just like giving her time and being patient. Because typically once she got into those things and she had done them a couple of times, she would be able to operate it independently. But so it was just that initial putting in that work in the front in those first couple of weeks so that she could do it independently later on.
Darren or Kelly?
Joshua was pretty knowledgeable on that when we started. So, what we really saw was the teachers were continuing to give him lessons as a part of their Zoom calls, or I keep saying Zoom calls. In his case, it's Google Meet. They were doing that. So they would tell him, okay, if you do this, to do this, to do this. And so they were still teaching him those things because, we didn't know how to use the Braille note, for instance, in that regard. So they were still giving instruction on that.
Okay.
I had to assist Claire with the Google slides and Google Classroom and everything, she didn't really know how to navigate through it. So I pretty much navigated through it for her, and I would pull up the assignments that she could see on the computer, and she would do those. And then the ones that she couldn't see, or the ones that we couldn't zoom in on, then I would kind of read that to her.
Okay. Okay. I think all of you indicated that you were utilizing Bookshare at some point. What apps were each one of you using, or your students using, to access Bookshare?
I honestly couldn't remember which app, but I saw somebody mention VoiceStream, and I know that she does use that app, and I'm thinking there's another one, but I can't think of the name of it.
I know once they start using them, you forget them.
I know, and it's on her iPad, and I'm not at home to look, or I would. But yeah, I know the VoiceStream was one that someone mentioned in the chat, and I know she does use that one.
Okay, Darren, do you remember?
I do not. I'm sorry.
That's
I know
okay.
we use
That's
that one, but I
okay.
don't know which app accesses it.
Oh, Claire's vision teacher just texted me and said, "Read to go."
She's
See,
watching.
I
Okay.
told you I've got the best vision teacher ever. So that's
Read
the
to
name
go.
of
Okay.
Read to go. Yeah.
Brittany, what about you?
I think there are a couple of the, there's a dolphin reader, there's the voice stream, and I think there might be one more. But,
There's lots of them.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting. It means that your students are probably pretty capable, since you aren't clicking that link for them to help them get there. And that is usually what happens. That, from a teacher's point of view, from my point of view, that's normal. The kids kind of take off and go, and you kind of forget because you don't use it, they do. For utilizing some of the Google Classroom, you don't remember the screen readers, so we did have a couple questions about Nvda, which is a screen reading software program, also Chrome Vox. And so I know you guys don't remember, so I just wanted to let the audience know that, because again, you weren't actively using them, and more likely the student was, that the name of the software isn't coming to mind as much, which is a different group. Was Josh able to see the bottom buttons for Class Dojo? Do you remember? With a screen reader or a braille display for Class Dojo?
Yeah, he has enough vision for light and movement that he can pretty much find his way. He can see the differentiation between the background color and the color of the button. So he has one spot on his left eye where he will take his iPad and he will do this, and he puts it right up against his face, and he can see the button to then click on it. So yes, he was able to do that. Just like he plays Hills of Steel on his iPad, he can see where the little button is because it's bright red and everything else is white.
So I know there's a high probability all three of you do not know what fall will look like. But if fall is a return to a classroom, and then mid-October, we have a 4-day notice that you have to go back to shelter in place and do this again, how would you prepare, and what would be that ideal assistance you would look for?
I think for us in that scenario, the biggest question is again going to be a new O&M teacher. With his O&M teacher that he's had the last 3 years is retired at the end of this year. Just making sure that the first few months of this school year, we built a really close relationship with he or she. I'm not sure that they've hired anyone yet. I think they have, but I have not met the person yet. So just making sure that there's a really good open line of communication there. Joshua's vision room teacher is, I'll argue with Kelly, she is the best in the United States. She is absolutely phenomenal. And so she is so proactive and so involved in Joshua's life that we really don't fear that for him. Again, in our case, it's our daughter that has the special needs that is a bigger issue for us than it is with Joshua. So,
okay.
I think with Claire, I couldn't ask for any more resources, or any more technology. I feel like we had all the technology at our fingertips that we could possibly ask for. And I think just because it was such a short notice, And I was more worried about during that time, just getting the work completed for Claire, making sure she understood what it was that we were doing. I think if it happens again, I think I'm going to put more focus on, okay, what program can she use to do that on her own? You know, instead of me constantly reading everything to her. And her vision teacher did try to work through some of that on some of the reading assignments that were given. But with the Google Slides, there was a lot of the stuff that even if we zoomed it in, it got blurrier, you know, and so she couldn't really see it. So I think my goal for next time is really to focus on that more so than completing the work, because I don't want to stress Claire out with that portion of it.
Brittany?
I think overall, I was very overwhelmed at the beginning with the amount of work that was expected from her, and from all the different contacts from each of her elementary teachers and from all of her related services. And I think that I would be a little more open to voicing that so that they would know, like, hey, like 7 contacts a day is a little too much for us. You know, and like 4 different Zoom calls every day, you know, is a little hard to manage when you're working from home and have other children. Because you just want everything to work, you want to do everything for your child and you want all that to work out, but you still have to have some sort of sanity at the end of the day. So I think I'd be a little more open to making people aware of that.
Okay, well, that helps. Okay, I think I've exhausted the chat questions at the moment. Robin?
Leanne, if you want to throw out the last question we wanted to hold the audience with, and perhaps while you do that, I'll make a few final comments.
And okay, I have more questions if we want to keep going.
Well, then I'll end it. They can't answer it then. Haha, I took it away.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Go for it, Robin.
Okay, I just didn't want to interrupt. Okay, so, you know, thinking about this, and actually just, you know, these are questions I just have thought about during this hour of really, thinking about what parents are thinking about, because it sounds like your experiences have been really great. They've really been great. And what would you say to the parents that are really struggling, that don't have the resources that you do? Because unfortunately, across the country, not everyone has access to the world's best TVI, because apparently this is a growing group. It just tells you how awesome TVIs are. But what support and what strategies or any ideas that you would give to our families that are struggling right now with all of these things?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm sitting here thinking we have like no negatives. Like we've said all these positives and how everything worked out and everything was perfect and we had everything and we didn't need anything. And I'm like, okay, not everybody's in that situation and not everybody was that way. But one of the things that I was encouraged during this time is do what you can do. And at the end of the day, if it's not done, it's okay. And complete what you can complete. And don't stress about completing everything that is assigned, and working with the teacher and trying to build that relationship with the child's teacher on, okay, we can do this and we can do this, but we can't do this. What can we do to replace this? And I think just being open with communication with the teacher on what your child can and cannot do would probably be my best advice through this. And as a parent, I know, do not stress because it's not worth it. At the end of the day, your sanity and your child's sanity is more important than that math assignment. And so they'll figure it out. They'll get it eventually.
Brittany?
I think, you know, I think an open communication line between your child's team and you is very important. I know all the TVIs and the teachers are working really hard to make sure that everything is accessible, but I mean, like things fall through the cracks at times, and sometimes it's just that your teacher doesn't know, so they may be managing you know, accessibility for 20 kids. And so if you tell them like a specific problem, I think they're more than willing to troubleshoot it with you and for you. It's just, you know, giving them that opportunity and working with them closely so that they know what's going on. Because if you tell them that everything's great, they're going to assume that everything is great. But I mean, exactly what Kelly said, you know, just giving yourself that grace and keeping your sanity and, you know, doing all you can do is all you can do.
Yeah, and I would say one of the best things that you can do is to build yourself a community. We live in a day and age where technology allows us to be in contact with people all over the world. And so, you know, we may not have all the answers as a parent of a blind student, but we can get on a forum in Facebook, or we can get on a Zoom call such as this or other resources that are available and build a community around us. I know my wife has worked very hard over the last couple of years to just build that Facebook presence and be able to say to other parents of blind kids, hey, what do you use in this case? What do you find is the most effective? And so sometimes we may not have accessibility to all of the technology, you know, as far as the Braille and the Braille note and all those things, but we typically would have the ability in today's day and age to make contact with other parents. And so you just do a little research. There's blogs out there that teach us, and forums, communities where we can gain better connection with other parents and kind of learn from each other on those things.
Robin?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So yes, and I think that's really a good place to kind of think about all this idea of community. And I just was actually reading in the chat that not all the communities have access to all these things. They don't have access to Wi-Fi. These are not be realities. And I think, Darren, what you're saying about is building community, however that looks, through TV, you know, through your school, and find ways. Yeah, the diverse community is a big issue of helping all of our students be connected and get everything they need, especially in this situation. So yeah, and just in the trying to be cognizant of time, really the thing that the last question I want to ask all these parents. So you're talking about, you know, that idea of giving, you know, what advice for other parents. What is a takeaway that you would like your student to get out of this experience? You know, I'm thinking back about, like, I have students who are now in grad school who are reflecting their time at the School for the Blind, having already done distance learning and the impact of that. And I'm going, this is old hat to me because I learned it in high school. So what do you see the impact of this non-traditional learning on your students going forward? Good, bad, indifferent? So thoughts on that?
I guess my thought on that would be, it's teaching, well, I've got a high school student, so let me back up. I've got a high schooler that this has really taught her and prepared her, I feel like, for college. Just because you don't have a lot of times a professor that's saying, complete this assignment, complete this assignment. This is kind of, it's been on her own time to get her stuff done. With Claire being my one with visually impairment, I think it has taught her that, I don't know, let me think about this for a minute. She is my free-spirited kid. She's kind of go with the flow. I don't really care if I have to get that done. I'd rather go and do this instead. And I think it has taught her a little bit more obedience to what is required of her, because she's kind of my go with the fly kind of kid.
I think in Joshua's case, he has really, really learned how much he absolutely loves his vision room teachers and his O&M teacher, that he's really understood the level of dedication that they're giving to him on a daily basis to make things accessible, to make him reach for independence, and to really, we don't know any other way to say it, but our teachers just absolutely love him. And he realizes that. He's seen that through this process of them going above and beyond. And so I think he's been really learned thankfulness through this process of really understanding what it is that the teachers are doing for him.
That's amazing. Brittany, how about you?
You know, we tried to really talk about, because there were some days where Addison was just like, she was having a really hard time. You know, she misses her friends, she misses being at school, you know, she misses being in therapy and all these different things. We typically keep a really busy schedule throughout the week. We're doing dance and therapy and school and, you know, birthday parties and social gatherings and whatnot. And so, you know, I think she had a really hard time coping with all of this, like being at home and not, you know, seeing people. But so just focusing on, you know, some of the good things that this brought is that, you know, it brought us more family time at home. My husband was home at work, which doesn't happen very often. You know, more family dinners at our table, you know, and interacting with our friends in a different way. And so, you know, just a slower lifestyle in general. So just appreciating some of those things that are not our norm.
Well, that's wonderful. And I love that you mentioned self-advocacy skills in there, because it's really like you're not sitting plunking yourself down in the desk and someone comes and brings it to you, you and do it and then hand it off to the waiter to take back to the kitchen. That's not how it works in this. You have to put a lot of skin in the game, and you have to advocate for yourself, not only as the parents need to, that we've learned during this time, but the students need to as well. So thank you everybody so much for all of your amazing insight. And I know Alan has some thoughts that he'd like to share.
Well, yes.
You wanted that last question too, Alan, so you let me know.
Yes, if you go ahead.
Okay. So I have placed a poll in there which says, what do you need that you feel you're missing right now? Is it technology? Is it services? Is it ideas? Is it strategies? And then other. And if you do select other, put your other in the chat. Use that chat and tell us what your other is. What do you need that you feel you're missing right now? Is it technology? Is it services? Is it ideas? Strategies? Or other? And drop it in the chat, and I better see some of those others, because I know some of you are selecting other, so I want to know what your other is. Besides, I saw one other is time.
Yeah, right.
Okay, someone said material, so there's a few other coming in there.
Right. Well, while we're collecting those responses, just wanted to tell everyone who's joined us today that this service, the Connect, is a function of the American Printing House for the Blind, and we are grant funded. And so we are curating and compiling information to share with all of the aides. We have Family Connect specifically for this group, families and children. We have Vision Aware for adults and seniors. We have Career Connect for job seekers. And we want your input. This is part of the compiling and collecting of information, this webcast, so that we can find out what you need. And we are a part of the American Printing House for the Blind, and most people know you can find answers and resources there as well. And so when you are lacking, and while we understand the need out there, that not everyone has as awesome appearance and TBIs as we have here, and each state, the services do vary. APH and the Connect Center wants to hear from you, and we want to help. We don't always immediately have the answers, but we take each situation that we get and try our best to find resources to meet those needs. So we'd love to hear from you. If you're a parent or a TBI, we want to hear about the most important need, technology that you've not been able to take home from school or do not have the funds for. You know, let us know, and we want to help wherever we can. Brittany and Kelly and Darren, you guys have helped us at APH in the past. You are clearly engaged and wonderful parents. I just want to thank you guys so much for sharing your experience with us. It's very heartening to see how involved in your kids' lives you are, and this positive response. You know, I was almost expecting to have a gripe session of hey, this is all bad. Clearly, you've done your part to do the best for your kids. So we want to put that out there that we can try to fill those gaps for other parents as well. And thanks again to Robin and Leanne as well. Robin, our moderator, and Leanne, who's running this whole thing.
Well, let me end this poll just so that you know. What did people say out there? So 39%, 40% roughly want strategies. That's what they feel they're missing. 28% ideas, 15% technology. We had other, 13% and services, 7. I will tell you inside the chat I was seeing time, sleep. I think I saw energy once. So people really needing other little things that I think we all could possibly use. So I think that would definitely be part of it. You have lots of thank yous in there. And I want to say thank you. This was really, really good. You've got lots of thank yous, lots and lots of thank yous.
One final thought, and thank you all. One final thought, back to the question earlier on, we were talking about images that were not accessible. And I know many of the TBIs will already know this exists. But APH has a section on its website called the Tactile Graphics Image Library. And if you are lucky enough to have embossing equipment available to you, whether it's in your home or something that you have access to, you can access images from the Tactile Graphics Image Library and run them off. Those images will represent just about any image you can think of in a textbook, no matter the subject. And if you don't have embossing equipment, you can use them as templates to use a tactile graphics kit to do a rough drawing to give your child a tactile representation. So I had made note of that. I wanted you to know that that does exist when images in books or on screen are not accessible.
It is a wonderful resource. It is, say the name of it one more time.
The Tactile Graphics Image Library, which is located at aph.org.
And do you have to have certain software for that tactile library to work?
None that I know of. I believe there is a membership that you have to, not paid, but you have to register to access those.
You would need an embosser.
Yes, the embosser is very helpful, but like I said, many of those you can use as just templates if you're parenting at home and are able to make a tactile representation of what you're seeing for your child. Okay.
Any final thoughts, Robin, or panelists, that you would like to leave our audience with?
I just want to say thank you. You are amazing parents, and I love seeing how involved you are with your kids. And I think you're inspiring all of us TBIs just to do more. So I really appreciate everything that you are doing with your kids.